Ever wish there was like a guidebook, for building AI? Not just any AI, but AI that's both innovative and responsible.
Yeah,
Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today.
sounds good.
We've got excerpts from the Developer's Playbook for Responsible AI in India. It's like a cheat sheet put together by NASCOM and Anand,
Okay.
with insights from some heavy hitters in the Indian AI scene, TCS, IIT, even Flipkart.
It's not just some theoretical document. It lays out the entire life cycle of an AI project. And it's not just for the coders either. Anyone involved in AI, from handling data to designing interfaces to actually deploying it, can find valuable guidance here.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about the why of all of this?
Right.
Why should we, the everyday users, care about what's happening behind the scenes with AI development?
Because these decisions will impact all of us. Think about AI in healthcare. Let's say there's an AI helping doctors diagnose illnesses. If that AI isn't built responsibly with things like data privacy and bias in mind, it could lead to misdiagnoses and improper treatment. The same goes for AI in finance transportation, even the apps we use every day.
All right, now that's starting to hit home. So this playbook is like a roadmap to making sure AI is used for good, not for things that could potentially harm people.
Exactly. And one of the first things they emphasize is making sure the AI is fit for purpose. They're talking about ensuring the AI is designed to solve the specific problem it's intended for and will be used appropriately for the context. They even reference Microsoft's responsible AI standard here, which have a whole section on this.
So no, using an AI meant for writing poetry to, say, manage air traffic control rate.
Right. Using the right tool for the job is crucial.
Hmm.
They're also really focused on unaccountable development, which is about making sure there's clear responsibility from the get-go. Who's calling the shots,
Right.
who's making the decisions,
Yeah.
and how is human oversight going to be woven into the process?
So it's like having checks and balances built in from the very beginning.
Precisely. They're establishing accountability to make sure someone is answerable for the AI's actions, especially as these technologies become more powerful.
That makes a lot of sense. We're not just letting AI run wild, we're building in safeguards right from the start. Okay, so we've got the purpose defined, everyone's on the same page. What happens next in this AI journey?
We move into the world of data, which the playbook calls collection, processing, and usage of data.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Data is like the fuel that powers AI, right?
Exactly. And the playbook dives deep into the implications of India's Digital Personal Data Protection Act of 2023, because this is where some of the biggest risks lie. One of the biggest ones they highlight is the risk of violating those data privacy regulations. The playbook is very clear about the need for consent when using personal data to train AI models. They even break down what a consent notice needs to include to be truly transparent.
It sounds like they're really trying to empower users to understand how their data might be used, not just burying it in some fine print.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it goes beyond getting that initial consent. They also address what happens if someone changes their mind and withdraws consent.
Right.
Can that data still be used?
Right.
Do users have the right to have their data completely erased from the system?
Oh, wow.
These are big questions that developers need to consider.
It's making me think about all those times I've blindly clicked agree without really knowing what I'm agreeing to. This playbook seems to be addressing those sorts of concerns head on.
It is, and they even get very specific about certain types of data that require even more attention, like CSAM child sexual abuse material and NCII non-consensual intimate imagery. They're drawing a hard line there, stating that any data used to train AI needs to be completely free from those types of content.
Okay, that's reassuring to hear. So we're talking about making sure the data itself is ethical and obtained properly. But what about what happens after the AI is trained?
Yeah.
Can't it still produce outputs that are biased or harmful, even if the data itself is okay?
You're hitting on another key risk they identify: the potential for AI to produce harmful or biased outputs. The playbook talks a lot about the need for data quality and representativeness. If the training data is skewed in some way, the AI will likely inherit those biases.
So even with good intentions, things can still go wrong if the data isn't carefully considered.
Right. And they go beyond just personal data, too. They also talk about the unauthorized use of non-personal or proprietary data, making sure developers have the legal right to use any data incorporated into their AI models. They even suggest things like keeping detailed data catalogs and getting internal permissions before using any data sets.
So it's like a multi-layered approach to data responsibility. It's not just about protecting individual privacy. It's about respecting intellectual property rights and ensuring the data is appropriate for its intended use.
Exactly. They're establishing a foundation of ethical data practices from the ground up. And it doesn't stop there. They dedicate an entire section to the risk of data security breaches, emphasizing the need for reasonable security safeguards throughout the process.
But what does reasonable actually look like in practice?
It's certainly more than just a simple password.
Right.
We're talking robust internal security measures to protect against those breaches, things like encryption access controls and regular security audits. They're also thinking about what happens if a breach occurs. Are there regulations about notifying the authorities?
Oh.
What about the people whose data might have been compromised?
Yeah.
This is where legal expertise becomes crucial.
So it's not just about building a fortress around the data. It's also about having a plan in place for if or perhaps when that fortress is breached.
Exactly. Transparency and accountability are critical even when things go wrong.
It sounds like stage 2 is all about dotting the I's and crossing the T's when it comes to data responsibility. No shortcuts allowed. But we're not done yet, are we?
Nope.
We've still got 2 more stages to go.
That's right. Next, we move from the raw material of data into the actual construction phase. Designing, developing, and testing the AI. This is where things get really hands-on.
All right, let's move into the workshop and see how they tackle the building process itself. What sorts of risks do they focus on in this stage?
They highlight quite a few, but one that jumps out is the potential for someone gaining unauthorized access to the model itself and using it in ways it wasn't intended for. Or even worse, using it to do something illegal.
So even if the AI is built with good intentions, it could still fall into the wrong hands and be used for nefarious purposes.
Exactly. And to address this, they stress the importance of access controls and usage policies. Who's allowed to use the AI?
Right.
What are they permitted to do with it?
Okay.
These details need to be clearly defined and, just as importantly, enforced. And if the AI model itself is being brought in from a third party, there are even more layers to think about.
Like making sure that third party is playing by the rules too.
Absolutely. The playbook talks about verifying the third party's rights to the model, ensuring it complies with all the intended usage policies, and even adhering to any internal guidelines the company might have. It's about doing your homework and understanding where the technology you're using comes from and what its limitations are.
It sounds like responsible AI development isn't just about the code you write, it's also about the partners you choose and the tools you decide to use.
That's a great point. It's about taking a holistic view of the ethical landscape. But unauthorized use of the model is just one risk they highlight. Another one that caught my attention is the unauthorized or irresponsible use of software code, especially if that code is generated by another AI.
Wait, hold on. AI writing code for other AIs? That feels like something straight out of science
It
fiction.
might sound futuristic, but it's becoming more and more common. But it also introduces new challenges. The playbook is very clear about verifying the legitimacy and licensing of any third-party code.
Right.
Is it being used legally?
Right.
Is it compliant with regulations? And if it's AI-generated code, they recommend getting internal permissions before using it. And this is key running checks to make sure the code is actually functional and doesn't introduce any new problems.
So even with AI doing some of the heavy lifting, we can't just assume it's doing everything perfectly.
No.
Human oversight is still essential.
You got it.
Yeah.
It's about verifying, validating, and making sure those AI assistants aren't accidentally introducing new vulnerabilities into the system.
Okay, so we've got unauthorized use of the model and code security. What's the next big concern in this construction phase?
This one is a biggie. Compromised security and robustness of the AI itself. We're talking about things like data breaches and hacking, but also those more sophisticated attacks that target the AI's algorithms or training data.
You mentioned adversarial attacks earlier. Is this what you were talking about?
Yes.
Where someone intentionally tries to manipulate the AI?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the playbook doesn't just say be careful. They actually point to resources like the Adversarial Robustness Toolbox and MITRE Atlas, which give developers tools and strategies to build more secure AI systems. It's like having a security checklist tailored specifically for AI.
It sounds like they're really taking a proactive approach, not just hoping for the best, but actually giving developers the resources they need to defend against these sorts of attacks.
That's one of the things I appreciate about this playbook. It doesn't just point out problems, it offers solutions and guidance.
Okay, unauthorized use code security, and now overall security and robustness. What other risks are they flagging in this stage?
One they highlight is the lack of transparency about how the AI was developed, what it can do, and just as importantly, what it can't do. They're pushing for what they call public transparency, providing clear documentation about the AI's architecture, training data, evaluation results, even the computing power used to build it.
So it's about moving away from that black box AI where nobody understands how the AI is making its decisions.
Exactly. They even get specific about the types of documentation, mentioning data sheets, model cards, and fact sheets.
Wait, why so many different types of documentation?
Because it's about tailoring the information to the audience. Data sheets might be very technical, while fact sheets are designed to be more user-friendly.
So it's not just about making information available, it's about making it understandable to the people who need it.
That's a key part of transparency. It's not really transparent if it's written in a language nobody understands.
Okay, so transparency is key. What other concerns do they bring up?
They delve into unexplainable outputs and model uninterpretability, which are two sides of the same coin.
I think I get unexplainable outputs. That's when the AI gives an answer, but nobody knows how it got there. But how is that different from uninterpretability?
Explainability is about knowing what factors led to a specific output, while interpretability is about understanding the logic behind why the AI made the decision it did.
So knowing what versus knowing why. Why is that distinction so important?
Because in some situations, just knowing what the AI did isn't enough, especially if it involves things like people's fundamental rights or safety. We need to understand the reasoning behind its decisions.
I can see why they make that distinction. But how do you make AI more explainable or interpretable in the first place?
It can get pretty technical, but they mention resources like IBM's AI Explainability 360 Toolkit and Google's Vertex Explainable AI, which provide tools for building more transparent AI models.
So it is possible to build AI that is both accurate and understandable.
That's the goal. We want AI that we can trust, and part of that trust comes from understanding how it works.
It's like having a window into the AI's thought process.
Precisely.
Okay, this stage is all about the nuts and bolts of building responsible AI. It's fascinating to see how they're tackling not just the technical challenges, but also the ethical implications of every decision. But the story doesn't end there, right?
You're absolutely right. The next stage takes us out of the development lab and into the real world where the AI interacts with users and impacts their lives. This is the deployment, monitoring, and maintenance phase.
So we're finally launching this AI out into the world. What happens next?
Well, the first hurdle is making sure the deployment itself is controlled. They advise against just releasing an AI model without proper testing, monitoring, or safeguards. Imagine the chaos.
Right.
Instead, they recommend a phased rollout, starting with a limited number of users to identify any problems before releasing it on a larger scale.
So it's like a beta test for AI, making sure everything is working as expected before it's available to everyone.
Exactly. That way, if any issues pop up, the impact is minimized. They also talk about the importance of having a plan for handling unintended or malicious use by third parties.
So even after all the careful development, there's still a chance someone can misuse the AI once it's out there.
It's a possibility they're not taking lightly. They encourage developers to think about how the AI could be misused and to put safeguards in place to prevent that. Things like clear terms of service usage policies and technical measures to prevent unauthorized access.
It's like they're trying to anticipate all the ways things could go wrong and build in protections from the start.
Right? And they even address open sourcing, which is when someone decides to make their AI model publicly available. In that case, they encourage developers to be transparent about how much access they're giving to the model's code, algorithms, and data. It's about sharing responsibly.
Transparency seems to be the running theme here.
Absolutely. And it continues into the monitoring phase.
Mm-hmm.
Once the AI is out in the world, they recommend implementing procedures to constantly track its performance. They even mention data drift and model drift, which are things developers need to be aware of.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What are data drift and model drift?
Data drift happens when the data the AI is using to make decisions starts to differ from the data. It was originally trained on. Model drift, on the other hand, occurs when the AI's performance changes over time, even if the data itself hasn't shifted significantly.
So it's not a set it and forget it situation. You need to keep an eye on the AI, make sure it's still working as intended and isn't making decisions based on outdated or skewed data.
Precisely. And they're not just monitoring for technical glitches, they're also watching for any evidence that the AI might be violating ethical or legal standards.
It's like an ongoing ethics checkup for the AI.
That's a great way to put it. They're making sure the AI stays on the right track even as it continues to learn and adapt.
What happens if the monitoring system detects a problem?
That's where incident reporting comes in. They encourage developers to have a clear system for documenting issues, collecting user feedback, and even having a grievance redressal mechanism, which is a fancy way of saying a process for handling complaints.
So it's not just about identifying problems, it's about having a plan to address those problems and make things right.
Exactly. And it goes even further. They also talk about having a disaster recovery plan. What if there's a major security breach, a system failure, or even just a huge drop in the AI's performance? They recommend having a plan in place to minimize the harm and get things back on track.
It's like an insurance policy for AI. You hope you never have to use it, but it's good to have it just in case.
Exactly. It's about mitigating risk and ensuring the AI's deployment is as safe and responsible as possible.
This entire playbook is about careful planning and thoughtful consideration. It's clear that they're not taking responsible AI development lightly.
Absolutely. It's about making sure that this powerful technology is used to benefit society and that its development is guided by ethical principles.
Speaking of powerful technology, there's one type of AI we haven't talked about in detail yet, generative AI. This is stuff that can create text images, even code. How does the playbook address this type of AI?
Generative AI definitely gets special attention. The playbook dedicates a whole section to the opportunity, the challenges, and the risks associated with this type of AI.
Well, then let's dive in. What are some of the things they highlight when it comes to generative AI?
One of the first things they emphasize, which echoes a point we talked about earlier, is fit for purpose. They want to make sure that generative AI models are designed and used in ways that align with their intended purpose.
So no using an AI designed to write sonnets to generate legal documents, right?
Exactly. It's about using the right tool for the job. And as with other AI applications, they also reiterate the importance of accountable development and use. Who's responsible?
Right.
Who's making decisions?
Yeah.
Who's providing oversight? All of these questions need to be answered clearly.
It sounds like the same principles of responsible AI development apply, whether we're talking about generative AI or other types of AI.
You're absolutely right. It's a holistic approach.
Okay, fit for purpose and accountability are crucial. What else are they emphasizing?
Data privacy, of course, remains a major concern. The playbook stresses the need to comply with all data protection regulations, especially India's Digital Personal Data Protection Act of 2023. They reiterate the importance of consent protecting sensitive information and implementing safeguards to prevent those data breaches we talked about earlier.
So data responsibility is just as important here as it was in those earlier stages.
Exactly. It's a foundational principle of responsible AI no matter what specific type of AI you're working with.
Okay, data privacy is paramount. What other risks do they highlight in the context of generative AI?
One that really stands out, and this is where things get really interesting with generative AI, is the potential for generating outputs that are biased, dangerous, or even illegal.
I can see how that could be a problem. If an AI can create text images or even code, it could potentially generate things that are harmful, misleading, or straight up illegal.
That's right. And to address this, the playbook emphasizes the need to carefully select and curate the data that is used to train these models, making sure it is free from bias, harmful content, or anything that could lead to outputs that violate ethical or legal standards.
So it's not just about the AI itself, it's about the data that fuels it.
Precisely.
Okay, so biased or harmful outputs are a big concern. What else are they highlighting?
Another risk they bring up is the unauthorized use of non-personal or proprietary data. This could involve things like copyright infringement, using trademarks without permission, or even mishandling confidential information.
I can see that could be a problem. If a generative AI is trained on copyrighted material, it might unintentionally create outputs that violate those copyrights.
That's the kind of scenario they're trying to prevent. They emphasize the need to make sure any data used to train the AI is either properly licensed or falls under fair use guidelines.
So again, it comes back to responsible data practices.
Exactly. It's a recurring theme for a reason.
Okay, data privacy biased outputs and unauthorized use of data. What else are they concerned about when it comes to generative AI?
Data security breaches are still a big one, especially given the sensitive nature of the data used to train generative AI. Implementing strong security measures to protect against those breaches is crucial.
So it's the same security concerns we discussed earlier, but even more important in the context of generative AI.
You got it. The potential consequences of a data breach involving generative AI could be even more significant, especially if it involves personal or confidential information.
What are they suggesting developers do to address this risk?
They reiterate the importance of those reasonable security safeguards we talked about earlier. Things like encryption access controls regular security audits and having a plan in place to respond to incidents quickly and effectively.
So it's not just about building a secure system, it's about having a plan for what to do if something goes wrong.
Right. They're encouraging developers to take a proactive and comprehensive approach to security.
Okay, data security is clearly a major concern. What other risks are they highlighting?
Another one is the potential for unauthorized or irresponsible use of generative AI models that are procured from third parties.
So it's not just about the risks of building your own generative AI, it's also about the risks of using AI that someone else has built.
Exactly. The playbook really emphasizes the need for due diligence when working with these third-party models. Developers need to make sure they have the legal right to use the model, that they understand its limitations, and that they have safeguards in place to prevent any misuse.
It sounds like they're really encouraging developers to think carefully about the entire ecosystem of AI development, not just their own little corner of it.
That's a great observation. Responsible AI development requires a broad perspective.
Okay, we've talked about data, privacy-biased outputs, data security, and the risks of using third-party models. What other concerns do they raise about generative AI?
The playbook also brings up the potential for unauthorized or irresponsible use of software code, particularly code that's either sourced from a third party or, and this is where things get really interesting, generated by other AI systems.
Wait, AI writing code for other AIs? I feel like we're entering a whole new level of complexity here.
It might sound like something out of a science fiction movie, but it's a reality that developers are increasingly facing. And the playbook emphasizes the importance of carefully evaluating any code that's being used with generative AI, whether it was written by a human or generated by another AI.
So human oversight is still crucial, even when AI is writing code for other AIs.
Absolutely. It's about making sure the code is safe, reliable, and used appropriately.
Hmm.
We can't just blindly trust that code generated by AI is going to be perfect or that it won't introduce new security vulnerabilities.
It seems like every step forward in AI development also brings new challenges that need to be addressed.
That's the nature of technological innovation. But the playbook is doing a great job of identifying those challenges and offering guidance on how to address them. It's not just about pointing out problems, it's about offering solutions.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of the risks associated with generative AI, but the playbook isn't just a list of warnings, is it? What kind of guidance do they offer for developers?
For each of those risks, they provide practical suggestions for mitigating those risks. For example, when it comes to biased outputs, they recommend very carefully selecting and curating the training data, using techniques like data augmentation to ensure the AI is exposed to a diverse range of perspectives, and even using bias detection and mitigation tools to identify and correct bias.
So it's not just about being aware of bias, it's about taking concrete steps to address it throughout the development process.
Exactly. And they offer guidance on mitigating the risks associated with data breaches, unauthorized access, and misuse of the AI model. They recommend things like implementing access controls, encrypting data, conducting regular security audits, and importantly, having a plan in place for what to do if a breach occurs.
It sounds like they're trying to give developers a complete toolkit for building and deploying generative AI responsibly.
That's exactly what they're doing. The goal is to make sure that generative AI can flourish and be used for good while also making sure it's used ethically and responsibly.
Okay, we've covered the risks and some of the ways to mitigate those risks. But what about the final stage of the AI lifecycle? How does the playbook address the deployment, monitoring, and maintenance of generative AI?
They emphasize a lot of the same principles we discussed earlier: controlled deployment monitoring for unintended or malicious use, and ongoing performance tracking.
So it's the same principles we've been talking about, but applied specifically to the unique challenges of generative AI.
That's right. For example, when it comes to deployment, they recommend a phased rollout, gradually increasing the number of users and carefully monitoring the AI's performance along the way.
So it's back to the idea of a beta test to make sure everything is working as expected before releasing it on a large scale.
Exactly. And when it comes to monitoring, they emphasize the importance of looking for signs of data drift or model drift, which, as we discussed earlier, can happen over time as the AI encounters new data or as its internal workings evolve.
It sounds like responsible AI development, especially when it comes to generative AI, is a continuous process, not something that ends when you hit the publish button.
Absolutely. It requires ongoing attention, vigilance, and a willingness to adapt as new challenges arise.
We've covered a lot of ground today, exploring every stage of the AI lifecycle through the lens of this playbook. But before we wrap up this section, I want to touch on one thing that really stood out to me: the emphasis on documentation. Why is that so important in the context of responsible AI development?
Documentation is all about transparency and accountability. It helps ensure that everyone involved in the AI development process is on the same page, and it provides a record of the decisions that were made, the rationale behind those decisions, and any potential risks or ethical considerations.
So it's like a blueprint for the AI explaining how it was built and why certain choices were made.
Exactly. And it's also a valuable resource for anyone who will be using or interacting with the AI. It can help them understand the AI's capabilities, limitations, and potential risks.
It sounds like documentation is a key part of building trust in AI systems.
That's a great way to put it. It's about making the AI's inner workings visible and understandable.
What kind of documentation are they talking about specifically?
They mention a few different types, including data sheets, model cards, and fact sheets.
Why so many different types?
It's about tailoring the information to different audiences. Data sheets might be more technical, providing detailed information about the AI's architecture and training data. Model cards are designed to be more accessible, summarizing the AI's capabilities, limitations, and intended use cases. And fact sheets can be even more tailored, providing information that is relevant to a specific stakeholder group.
So it's not just about making information available, it's about making it understandable to the people who need it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Transparency is only effective if the information is communicated in a way that people can grasp.
Okay, so clear and comprehensive documentation is essential. What else are they recommending?
They also stress the importance of communication and collaboration throughout the development process. This could involve regular meetings, workshops, feedback mechanisms, basically creating opportunities for everyone involved to share information, ask questions, and contribute their perspectives.
So it's not just about documenting decisions, it's about having open dialogues and ensuring that everyone's voice is heard.
Exactly. Responsible AI development is a collaborative endeavor. It requires input and feedback from a diverse range of stakeholders.
Okay, we've talked about documentation and communication. What else are they emphasizing?
They also talk about the importance of training and education. This could involve providing developers with training on ethical AI development principles and educating users and the public about the capabilities and limitations of AI.
So it's about making sure that everyone has the knowledge they need to make informed decisions about AI.
That's right. Knowledge empowers people to engage in thoughtful discussions about AI and to demand responsible development practices.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground in this section. We've talked about the risks and best practices associated with building and deploying AI with a special focus on generative AI. And we've seen how the playbook emphasizes transparency, documentation, communication, and education throughout the entire AI lifecycle.
It's been quite a journey.
It has.
But before we move on to the next section, I want to hear your thoughts on what this all means for you, the listener.
I'm ready for that. I feel like we've unpacked a lot of information about responsible AI development. But now I'm wondering what it all means for the everyday user of technology. You know what I mean?
It means that the way AI is being developed will have a direct impact on your life. We've talked about data privacy bias, mitigation, transparency. These aren't just abstract concepts. They have real-world implications for how AI is used in healthcare, finance, transportation, and even the apps we use every day. This deep dive has given you a glimpse into the forces at play, equipping you to ask important questions about the AI you encounter in your daily life.
That's so true.
And one of the big questions we're all facing is this: how do we strike a balance between AI's increasing autonomy and the need for human oversight? The playbook emphasizes human oversight, but as AI becomes more sophisticated, this becomes a trickier question to answer.
That's a question for all of us, not just the developers.
Absolutely. It's a conversation that needs to happen in our communities, our schools, our workplaces, and even our homes.
So to our listeners, we ask, what are your thoughts on this balance? How much autonomy should AI be granted? What are your hopes and concerns for the future of AI?
These are complex questions with no easy answers.
Yeah.
But by engaging in these discussions and demanding responsible development, we can help shape a future where AI benefits all of us.
This deep dive has given you a taste of the playbook's wisdom. But don't stop here. We've included links to the full playbook and some of the resources we discussed in the show notes.
Yeah, check it out.
There's a whole world of responsible AI to explore.
We encourage you to continue exploring this fascinating world of responsible AI. Remember, the future of AI isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we create together.
I love that.
Yeah. It's fascinating how this playbook isn't just about ticking boxes for developers.
Yeah, it feels like it's painting a bigger picture of how India is approaching the entire AI landscape.
You're right. It's a proactive approach, not just waiting for problems to crop up, but thinking about potential issues from the very start and building in safeguards.
And it's not just developers in their silos either. There's this strong emphasis on collaboration. Like they're saying responsible AI is a shared responsibility involving policymakers, researchers, even the public.
Absolutely. They're grounding these ethical principles in India's legal framework, specifically referencing regulations like the Digital Personal Data Protection Act of 2023. It makes those principles enforceable, not just some lofty ideal.
Yeah, it sends a message that responsible AI development isn't optional, it's a requirement.
Exactly. AI is going to play a huge role in our lives, and we need to make sure that influence is a positive one, and that starts with building and deploying it responsibly.
One thing that keeps coming up is the idea of human oversight. Like they're saying, let's not just let AI run wild.
It's about using AI to enhance human capabilities, not replace them entirely. It's a tool, and like any tool, it needs to be used wisely and with careful consideration.
And that ties into the emphasis on transparency, moving away from that black box approach where nobody knows how the AI is making its decisions.
Transparency builds trust. If people understand how an AI system works, they're more likely to accept it and feel comfortable using it.
And trust is crucial, especially as these systems become more integrated into our lives.
Absolutely. We need to be able to trust that these systems are fair, unbiased, and not being used in ways that could harm us.
So we've got human oversight and transparency as key themes. What other important takeaways are there from this playbook?
They highlight the need for ongoing learning and adaptation. The playbook acknowledges that AI is a rapidly evolving field. New challenges are popping up all the time.
So it's not like they're saying, here's the final word on responsible AI. It's more of a starting point, a framework that needs to evolve with the technology.
Exactly. They even suggest getting feedback from experts across different fields to keep the playbook updated and relevant.
It's like they're building in a mechanism for continuous improvement, recognizing that responsible AI is a journey, not a destination. What other key elements stand out to you?
There's a strong emphasis on diversity and inclusion in AI development.
Making sure the teams building these systems are representative of the diverse populations that will be using them.
Exactly. Different backgrounds bring different perspectives and lived experiences, which can lead to more fair and equitable AI systems.
So it's not just about the code, it's about the people writing the code. Responsible AI development needs to be a human-centered endeavor.
Yeah.
It sounds like India is really trying to position itself as a leader in this space.
It's definitely a bold statement. They're saying, look, we're not just focused on building the most advanced AI, we're also committed to building it responsibly. And they're backing that up with concrete guidelines.
It's like they're setting a new standard for what it means to be a technologically advanced nation in the age of AI.
Right. It's not just about progress for the sake of progress. It's about making sure that progress benefits everyone.
This playbook is definitely a step in the right direction, but as you said earlier, it's just one piece of a very large and complex puzzle.
Of course, there's still a lot of work to be done, but this playbook provides a solid foundation, a framework for ethical and responsible AI development.
It's a roadmap for navigating the complexities of this new technological frontier.
And it's a call to action for all of us to join this conversation and help shape the future of AI in a way that benefits humanity.
Well said. This playbook has given us a lot to think about, but now I'm curious, what are your thoughts on the larger implications of all this? How does this playbook fit into the global conversation about responsible AI?
India is setting a precedent here by creating these guidelines. They're signaling that they take responsible AI development seriously, and they're not waiting for someone else to tell them how to do it.
It's about taking ownership of their own technological future.
Precisely. And it's an invitation for other countries to step up and join the conversation, to share their own best practices and work together to create global standards for ethical AI development.
It's like they're saying, let's make sure AI is a force for good in the world, not a source of new problems.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing that AI has the potential to transform our world in profound ways, both positive and negative. And it's up to us to guide its development in a direction that benefits everyone.
Okay, so this playbook is both a statement of intent and a call to action. It's about setting a standard for India and for the world.
Right. It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping the future of AI.
And as we wrap up this section of our deep dive, I want to bring it back to our listeners. What are the key takeaways they should keep in mind?
This playbook isn't just about developers, it's about all of us. It's a sign that India is committed to developing AI in a way that's ethical, responsible, and beneficial to society.
It's a reminder that we need to be informed, engaged, and ask questions about how AI is being developed and used.
Exactly. The future of AI is not predetermined. It's something we create together.
And with that in mind, let's move on to the final section of our deep dive. We've explored the playbook's insights, but now I'm wondering, what does it all mean for you, the listener? How can you take this information and apply it to your own life? This playbook is a wake-up call. It's a reminder that AI is already shaping our world in profound ways, and it's only going to become more pervasive in the years to come.
It's interesting. We started talking about a playbook for developers,
Yeah.
but it feels like we've uncovered a much broader conversation,
Yeah.
about the role of AI in society.
That's a great observation.
Mm-hmm.
This playbook isn't just about technical guidelines. It's a reflection of a changing mindset.
Right.
There's a growing recognition that technological progress needs to be balanced with ethical considerations.
Exactly. And that responsibility doesn't stop with the developers. It's on all of us as users and citizens to demand AI that's ethical, transparent, and accountable.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Think about the choices you make as a consumer.
Yeah.
Do you research the companies behind the AI-powered products you use?
Mm-hmm.
Do you question how your data is being collected and used?
Oh, yeah.
These are questions we all need to be asking.
Yeah, it's easy to feel like we're just along for the ride with AI, that it's moving so fast we can't keep up. But this playbook gives me a sense of hope.
Yeah.
It shows that the conversation about responsible AI is happening right here in India, and it's gaining momentum.
Yeah.
It's not just something happening in Silicon Valley or in academic journals. It's a conversation that's relevant to all of us.
Absolutely.
It's about shaping the future of technology in a way that reflects our values and priorities.
It is.
And that future is something we're all a part of creating.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
The future of AI is not predetermined.
Right.
It's a future that we are actively shaping with every choice we make.
That's a powerful message.
It is.
Eduardo?
By staying informed, asking critical questions, and demanding responsible development, we can help ensure that AI is used to create a world that benefits everyone.
Beautifully said. And remember, you can find links to the full playbook and all the other resources we mentioned in the show notes. Keep learning, keep exploring, and keep asking those important questions. Until next time, happy diving.
Sounds good.